Roll SK here from Bitter Old Goons Gaming, and we have an unboxing, teardown, and review for you here today. Today we're going to take a look at the RetroEngine Sigma, which is a Kickstarter product which promises retro gaming for a bunch of different old consoles in a small package that's plug-in via HDMI and any USB connector to allow you to play retro games on your home television system. So, a little bit of background. This was a Kickstarter Indiegogo project that came out last year. I actually invested in this product in June of 2016, and it only arrived in roughly September of 2018. The gist of the product is, it's a 4-core Cortex A7 processor. It's passively cooled. It's got a Mali 400 MP2 GPU, 512 megabytes of DDR3 RAM, a couple of USB 2.0 ports, and power supply, micro SD card, wireless, optional Bluetooth, programmable status LEDs, 2 user configurable buttons, and HDMI in full HD. And originally the campaign said that they were going to do this in 4K, but the end result is not such. It's you can do 1080p at close to 60 frames per second depending on the software. So this is the product that arrived. It was designed in California by the Doyodo team and manufactured in China. Let's see what we have in the package here. So this particular kit is the deluxe version. It cost $89 US. And there we have. Comes in a custom box. And this particular kit came with extra controllers and an SD card and stuff like that. So we have a quick start guide. And what it says: before you connect to power, plug in the controllers and HDMI cable. Don't use 6-button retro controller without shoulder buttons for setup. Follow the screen instructions once it's plugged in. So let's go ahead and see what comes in the box. Now this unit here is, of course, the actual Retro Sigma 4-core console, and as you can tell, it's pretty tiny. It has your micro SD, HDMI, and power connector in the back, and 2 USB 2.0 connectors on the side, and a micro SD card slot on the back. So one thing to say is that's nice that it's accessible from the back. So that's a plus, and it's got some custom labeling on the back. One thing I noted right away: there's a little bit of travel damage on the corner, but that's not particularly a big deal. And this deluxe model came with an extra 32 gigabyte SD card, a DualShock analog controller, as you can see there, the Bluetooth expansion, which I'm assuming is somewhere in here. Now, one thing it says is that the 32 gigabyte SD card is pre-installed, and looking at this, there is no 32 gigabyte SD card. We have our Chinese knockoff dual analog controller with some manufacturing defects right out of the box. Just briefly, the buttons feel as cheap as you would expect. The controller has very little weight, but it's USB, and that's just fine. We have our retro controller. Now, this might be actually handy because it has a Sega Genesis Master System layout. Our generic USB power adapter and an HDMI cable. But I'll tell you what, folks, what I do not see in this package at all. Oh, here we go. There we go. So, we have our RetroEngine USB 32 stick, our Bluetooth adapter. This is a micro USB to standard USB connector, and we have a USB 32 card reader. So, yeah, it looks like everything came intact. Just going to briefly check to make sure there's nothing else appears to be in the box. So, all in all, fairly well packaged. This brings us to the 4-core retro Sigma engine itself. And we'll just set the memory cards and stuff aside. We will go through the calibration and setup instructions, but let's get right to the teardown. Okay, so let's get into it. As you can tell, the case is quite small. 4 simple Phillips screws hold the bottom on. It's fairly typical of any manufactured device I've ever seen that didn't use some weird proprietary screws. So many people will be asking, what's the difference between this and a Raspberry Pi based unit? And the gist of the answer is literally nothing. This is an Orange Pi Lite, which is a Raspberry Pi clone, passively cooled and shoved into a fairly nice case. As you can see, we've got our Wi-Fi antenna there. We have our option buttons wired into the GIPO. If I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, I apologize. In general, the layout on the inside is fairly well done. You know, the wires are neat and well held down. The LED is glued in place, as you can see there. But the gist of this is this here Orange Pi Lite is a $12 US product. And the extra buttons and things like that might cost at best a couple of dollars. What we have here is an Orange Pi Lite clone shoved into a custom case. So at the $89 price point, you might ask yourself, is this worth the price? So, okay, in general, you're going to spend about $15 to $30 on a Raspberry Pi. You're going to spend about $10 on a case. You're going to have to buy the controllers, the power supply, the memory card, and the rest of it. And honestly, it's probably not going to look as nice as this finished case. So really, this is not a bad deal. I think there are some issues with this product in terms of how it's been marketed. Oh, and this would be a good time to remember to put the screws in the actual Orange Pi Lite itself. Anyway, in terms of the product itself, so for $89, we got the micro SD card, the SD card reader, a Bluetooth dongle, 2 controllers, the power supply, the case, and the HDMI cable. Could you build this for less yourself? Yes, you could. What would you get if you built this for less money yourself? Well, you'd get essentially not as nice of a case. It would not come with the peripherals such as the controllers or the power supply. You could buy that separately, and you would have to pre-configure all the software yourself. And one of the benefits to this system is supposedly we plug it in, sync it to our phone, and it will pre-install all the software for us, which, quite frankly, is not a bad deal. Now, I'm assuming that the people that manufactured this are taking home about 30% of the profit price on it, maybe a little bit more, but not bad. I mean, you're spending less than $100 for a console clone. There we go. That can potentially play Super Nintendo, Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Sega Master System, pretty much any console you could desire, including retro arcade games, up until the level of Dreamcast or N64, at which point this thing will not have the horsepower to do it. So let's get this thing plugged into the home TV, and we'll go through the calibration and setup process, and then load some ROMs and see how it does. Well, we have the RetroEngine Sigma all set up and ready to go. The installation process was not that straightforward, but it's honestly a little bit easier than doing your own ROM pack for a Raspberry Pi for RetroPie. Basically, what you have to do is you turn on the Retro Sigma, and it will create a wireless network that you then connect to with your phone. And once you've done that, you can click on the IP address under your Wi-Fi settings, or at least that's what I had to do, which then brings up a web address, which lets you put in your wireless network password. And at that point, it will connect to your wireless network and begin downloading all the installation packages. Now, I had to actually move mine closer to my wireless router because I found the wireless antenna inside the thing is not that great. In fact, even now, sitting under my TV, it is not connected to the internet, but that is fine for what we're going to use it for. We don't really need it to do that. Now, I want to say it looks great next to the rest of my consoles, and I'll put up an image now. As you can see, it fits in quite well, and you know, it's a good-looking little piece of kit when it's all set up. I did spend a couple of days, and it wasn't all hands-on, but it did take a couple of days to install. Well, in my case, I went overboard and ended up installing, you know, thousands of arcade games and every Sega Master System and Mega Drive and Nintendo and SNES game I can get my hands on. So one thing to say is that this is definitely just RetroPie, but it's been customized for this specific Retro engine or the Orange Pi Lite. And I'm just going to scroll to the right and show you what it comes with. Out of the box comes with the following emulators: the Super Nintendo, Amiga, the Apple II. It comes with MAME 2003, though it's pretty easy to update it to 2010 if you like. Comes with Kodi, which is sort of a media center application, and Sega Master System, the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis if you're in North America, the old NES, and there is in fact an old IBM 286 clone, and there's some pretty common Linux ports under here, you know, Cannonball, Doom, etc., things like that. So I'm gonna tell you why it took 2 days to get mine set up. Number one, the particular unit I have is a 32 gigabyte card. I wanted to load it up as much as I could with all the ROMs as that I could. And for my purpose, I'm going to use this as an SNES, NES, Genesis, Sega Master System emulator more than anything, because I do not have a full collection of those games, and there might be a few on there. And for that purpose, it'll be just fine, and I just want to put those all on there. And then I went through the laborious process of letting it scrape all the game titles and descriptions from the internet, and that's actually what ended up taking the most time. So just copying them over was a very easy thing to do. Just like most RetroPies, once this is connected to your wireless network, if you have a PC, Windows PC connected to that network, or a Linux PC for that matter, you can just access the ROMs folders from your wireless network directly and just drag and drop whatever you like. Once you've done that, you can hit scraper here, and that will let you update all the game's database information and pictures. So right off the bat, I will warn you that because I've loaded this thing up with thousands of games, the boot time is now up to a couple of minutes, which, you know, we're not really used to in the modern console means. But tell you what, let's go check out a few of the games here. And of course, because I have so many, it's gonna be a pain. But we can go check out some Super Mario World. Which I'm sure must be on here. I haven't actually checked, but there we go. I'm sure it is. Here's Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Oh, maybe I don't actually have Super Mario World on here. Well, that would be disappointing. Okay, well, maybe it's just under something else. Okay, let's find something else. What are some other good classics here? Super Street Fighter 2, Starfox. We can give that a go. That this would be probably a pretty tough game for this thing to play. Sometimes these things with the extra add-on chips don't emulate so well. And again, I haven't tried this, but it's using SNES 2010. And one thing I will suggest... Oh, look at that. One thing I will say is that the controller that they provided for it, though, is kind of cheap feeling. It's not super cheap feeling. It does work right out of the box, and it's pre-configured for this. And I've been able to access all the menu functions I need to, unless it was something that absolutely required a keyboard, like the Amiga or the Apple II, which does require a keyboard connection. But I've plugged in a few generic keyboards, and neither really which had an issue. So as you can see, Starfox looks like it's playing. Let's load her up. 1993. I was the most excited kid at 12 when this was announced. Do a barrel roll. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Let's just go right to the game. We'll check out a little bit of the first level, and yeah, man, let's do that one. I used to know all the secrets in this game too, but we'll just check out a bit of the first level and see how it chooches. Now, some Raspberry Pi clones and Raspberry Pis, for that matter, have an issue where there's a bit of input lag. In fact, most emulators are going to have a little bit of that issue, unless it's, you know, sort of a high-end gaming PC type emulator with the most modern MAME or emulation system set up. Already we can tell it's struggling a little bit with this game. There's a little bit of audio artifacting. And I should mention there's a number of different filters and things you can set up too if you want. Yeah, there we can see she was struggling there. Frame rate drops on an SNES game. So that's maybe worth talking about, is you're not going to be playing PlayStation 1 or N64 games here. Oh, that was a bomb. There we go. You are not going to be playing probably Dreamcast stuff in this. Follow me. Okay, so, you know, it's not as good as a real NES playing Starfox. I will tell you that for sure. But, I mean, it's playable. Yeah. I just want my double blasters, you son of a bitch. There we go. So there you go. A few extra things on the screen, and it's going to be hurting a bit. But there are probably things I can do to tweak this as well. Like, okay, there we go. We just hit start, select, exit. There's things I can do as well to sort of tweak that. I think you could probably get a little bit of an overclock out of this thing. Now, out of the box, it does not have a heat sink. So I will probably add one on as an extra. See how that chooches, and I'm not opposed to upgrading this. So check out F-Zero, which was not a super FX chip game, and therefore might run a little bit better, but also a classic. Yeah, and this looks fine. Looks crisp. Playing on HDMI, as you can see. Let's give the Night League a go. And it is possible to save your states using RetroPie as well. Oh yeah, that works fine. I mean, I suck, but the game's fine. This could take a little bit of a time to remember how to play. Now, I'm trying to remember what it's supposed to do when you hit jump. Like, there's a way to land it so that you go further in this game. I can't freaking remember. Like, is it pull back? Who knows? But as you can see, F-Zero is like fine. There's no issue playing this game at all. Again, it looks great. There's no tearing. There's no weird audio effects. And I would think that the same would be said for probably 99% of the SNES ROMs that are out there. And so, like for an SNES emulator, the thing works fine. Obviously, this is not the ideal joystick for this. I do have USB Super Nintendo controllers that I can use with this, and they just plug in like normal and should just work right out of the box. But there you go. SNES emulation appears to work fine on this. And again, like for the price, you know, 70, 80 bucks, it's not bad. Amiga and the Apple II stuff does work. I'm not going to launch anything because again, you need a keyboard to do this. And it comes again with the UAE Ambiberry launcher. Apple II as well. Start the Party. Party is a 2009 reality video game for the PlayStation 3. Just gonna click on that and hope it doesn't crash my unit here because it's not an Apple II game. Hello, I am Apple II. Glad to meet you, my friend. Okay, so here's where you need a keyboard. Because I am pooched without it, I think. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I mashed some combination. Waiting for X server to shut down. Closing log file. Okay, so the Apple II emulator works. Let's check out some arcade stuff. And I'm going to try to shoot for strikers. Hopefully I can find it on here. I didn't review any of the ROMs I put on here. I basically just sort of grabbed 8 gigabytes of whatever and threw them on here. And as a result, I have some 30 or 29,000 files, and not all of them are going to be anything. But whatever. I'll have to go through this and again on the network and just sort of clean it all out. Strikers, where are you, buddy? Oh, it's hung up again. It seems to hang up on that one game. Yeah, I'm gonna just quickly restart Emulation Station. And we'll try that again. I'll pick a different arcade game. See if Aero Fighters is on there. It starts with A. But, you know, pretty easy to put the actual ROMs on there. I was able to just put the zip files on and configure this thing to use MAME 2010, which appears to be working fine for most of them. Now, this is not as compatible, I'm finding, as MAME for, like, the PC. And I'm sure that if I learned how to use it properly, I could probably tweak that a little bit. But it's not as supported in terms of all the games and BIOSes and things like that. And that's probably pretty reasonable. MAME has been used for all kinds of arcade emulation forever. Okay, we're just waiting for Emulation Station to restart. So this will probably be a point where I'll ask Kevin to edit this part out. Okay, we're back. As mentioned, Amiga and Apple II work fine, but you need a keyboard to make them run. And we'll demonstrate some arcade games. I've got way too many installed. I just sort of grabbed a whack based on how much space I had left on it and threw them on there, so I don't even know which ROMs work, and I'll have to spend some time working through that. And I'm using MAME 2010. It seems to work a little bit better. So, I'm not holding my breath, because I'm not sure which ones work and don't. And that's something you have to figure out. You know, I would recommend that you just sort of make a list of games you want, and then just try to load those instead of trying to put them all on here. I'm a bit of a completionist, but I think I reached a little bit too high. But it looks like we got something here. Not sure if this is a loading test pattern or if the game is broken. Okay, we'll exit out, try the next one. $2,000, hey, this is a fairly new ROM, so maybe I don't have the horsepower to run this one. These little Pi clones are best to run older games by far. They just simply don't have the clout. So let's try something a little older here. 1987, the Battle of Midway. Now on GitHub, there's a really good list of compatible and non-compatible ROMs per MAME version, depending on which one you have installed and are running on Raspberry Pi, or Orange Pi Lite in this case. Surely the classic 1942, it's going to be fine. Here we go, some success. So yeah, this is a 1984 arcade game. It seems to work just fine. No real issues there. So I'm going to exit that and see if I can find something a little more complicated. Four-player bowling alley. No. Let's try to look for anything I might recognize. See, all these are all BIOSes I put on there. I shouldn't have done. So again, I have to go through here and clean out the trash. Let's see, Aero Fighters. Okay, looks like we got Aero Fighters 2. Give that a try. And that appears to work just fine as well. Sound seems to come through fine through HDMI. No real issues with that. Now, I will say that the image is stretched a little bit, and I think that's mostly my TV's fault, but you can edit the video editings. It takes a little bit of doing, but you can go through at the startup of each game and open up a menu to adjust some things and add things like scan lines, for example. Yeah, more power. Anyway, this is totally playable, and furthermore, this would be playable with two people. You just plug in a second controller and then you'd be laughing. Let's see if it'll let me quit now. There we go. So here's just a place where we can perhaps change some of the settings. Video output settings, as I was just talking about here. Vertical refresh rate, screensaver on and off. Window height, scale, all that stuff. Yeah. It's all settable, and typically it's gonna go to whatever the core default is, and by core I mean ROM. So let's try something else. I was hoping I put Metal Slug on here, so I'm going to scan down to that and see how that chooches. Now, a actual Raspberry Pi 3, though, is about 3 times as much as an Orange Pi Lite, which powers this, does have 1 gig of RAM versus the half a gig that's in this, and that's going to make a big difference in some of these games. So, Metal Slug. Up we go. Okay, so I'm not sure which of these are going to be the ones that work. I did attempt to put the full Metal Slug ROM on here, but I don't believe it's a Capcom game, so We'll see if MAME 2010 can run it. And by the way, this is a screen. Press button to configure. That's where you can edit the game startup things. Well, it's doing something. Neo Geo, not Capcom. Well, folks, there you go. Metal Slug. But it will not appear to let me actually start the game. Oh, there we go. See, we're just maxing out. And let's see at the top right there, I think, potentially skip frames. Well, I just rebooted her. But as you can see, Metal Slug works. However, the start button on this is a little bit iffy. Okay, so that's it for arcade stuff. Again, I have to go through and clean out a bunch of the crap or rubbish that's in here. But yeah, see, does it tell me the actual ROM? No, it doesn't. But they do work. So let's check out Cody. Again, is just your standard. What can I say? Cody is just like an overlay for playing media, music, movies, stuff like that. Works fine. Sega Master System. Okay, so there should be plenty in here that work just fine. Let's give Double Dragon a go from the original Sega Master System. I had a friend who had this game. I loved it. Double Target. Okay, not Double Dragon, but we'll give it a go in any case. I have no idea what the hell's going on. Looks like I'm apparently playing Commander Keen is what it looks like here. Oh, and that thing kicked my butt. Oh, kicked my butt again. Well, there you have it. Sega Master System games work just fine. Oh my goodness, they had Earthworm Jim on the Sega Master System? No way. And Echo the Dolphin. Oh, that's gotta look awful. A little bit of weird audio stuff going on there. Fair enough. Oh yeah, that's pretty bad. Hey, I can do flips. It's magical. It's not that magical, folks. It's actually really bad. But Sega Master System, if you're into those classic Sega games, and I know there's a few in there, like Paratrooper and stuff, I'm going to love. Let's move on to the Mega Drive. And we would know this as Genesis. And there are definitely some games in here that I absolutely love. So I'm going to rip on right down to Toe Jam and Earl, because that's one of my favorites. And we got the Japanese and the European version. Comes pre-installed Genesis Plus emulator, and it, tell you what, it looks and sounds perfect. Great, let's start the game. Yeah, the start button's pretty bad. Yeah, I know it's Big Rappin' Earl. I may have to take that apart and check it out. But this gives me an opportunity to try this, the other retro controller that came with the RetroEngine Sigma. So let's plug it in and see how it does. Start button works fine on here. There's a map button. No, I don't want to drop it. I want to open it. Oh, that's not useful. Anyway, this controller seems to work fine. And of course, what Genesis play test would be the right without Sonic the Hedgehog. So let's check it out. Rev 0 World. Let's try Rev 1 World. Yep, that looks perfect. Right on, man. Classic. So yeah, Sega emulator works just fine. So if you're looking for something to emulate like these older Nintendo, Genesis, Sega Master System, then this is your unit. You know, again, the $80 you spent for this, which is not bad. You get the memory card, 2 controllers, pretty easy to configure, though admittedly it'd be just marginally easier compared to like something like a Raspberry Pi. Comes in a nice case, comes with a power supply, HDMI cable, comes with a memory card reader, and what else does she come with? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, shit, the ring. Get the ring, get the ring, get the ring. Oh, I missed it. And it, you know, it appears to work just fine. And for that price point, you know, again, I think they're making $10 or $15 off each sale. It's worth it for the case alone. It's a nice case. So N64, I didn't bother to add any ROMs because, from what I understand, the ROMs for N64 do not run well on this. And I have an N64, so it was no point. Okay, we're going to go right to Super Mario 3. Which I have a copy of, but I want to see how it chooches on this. And this is an NES emulator. And it looks great. Oh yeah, that's fine. That's totally playable. Look at me, little pro here. Come here, buddy. Oh no! Well, as you can see, the Nintendo emulator seems to work just fine. This game is great. It's fun to be able to play it again. I think it'd be better on a Nintendo controller, which I have, so I might try that out next. But, there you have it. That's the Retron, or sorry, the Retron, RetroEngine Sigma, and yeah, it works fine. You know, for what it is, it works great. And what it is a slightly less powerful Raspberry Pi 3 shoved into a very pretty case that looks just great on your next to your other consoles, and appears to play Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Sega Master System, and classic arcade games just fine. Overall conclusion, yeah, it's pretty good. You need to be a little bit tech savvy and understand Raspberry Pi. You're going to be frustrated with some configuration files, but there's lots of literature and videos online with how to do that. I highly recommend you get better controllers than what they give you, but like a USB controller will plug in just fine with it. And yeah, I enjoy the product, and it's going to sit out here with the rest of my consoles and supply me with retro games as need be. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, like and subscribe, and we'll be back with new tech videos anytime soon. Thanks for watching. I'm Roll SK from Bitter Old Goons Gaming.